now moving into another phase of a startup when they are taking in investors and raising money. So now, what kind of thing they should look out for when they are raising money? I have seen a couple of startups. Not going to name anyone here, but when they were raising money and they were going into investments, taking in money, uh, they ended up raising in a way that ended up giving the investor more rights over the company. So that was something that I feel like they should know how to do.
Yeah, so you want to be aware, first of all, the most important thing is what sort of instrument you use to raise money, like what kind of legal paperwork. So there's different options. There's, raising straight equity where you actually sell somebody shares in your company at a usually like a fixed valuation, and that gets pretty complicated. Usually there's like a whole term sheet, there's all these rights that the investors are going to insist on. They're going to become party to your shareholder agreement, or more likely they're going to ask you to replace those documents with something that sort of they came up with. That sort of gives them some protection. They might ask for a board seat, rights to follow on future investments, how their shares get treated if there's a sale. It gets pretty complicated. And that should not be, if you're like an early stage company raising a seed round, that should not be your first option ideal, unless you're raising like 2 or 3 million and a significant amount of money. If you're a startup and you're just getting off the ground and doing kind of like a friends and family round, raising 20 grand from this person, 50 grand from this person, kind of stuff, you're much better off using a SAFE. Stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. They're invented by Y Combinator a few years ago, and they're very popular. They're great because they're very, very simple. There's basically no negotiation to a SAFE. You just give it to investor. There's two things you kind of paste in there is the valuation cap, like what's the maximum valuation that the SAFE's going to convert at, and the discount. And I can explain these a bit more after the SAFE works, but I tell you how the SAFE works. But it's a very straightforward document. There's no negotiation. There's no back and forth. You don't have to agree on a valuation for the company. The investor just agrees how much we're investing. And the way a SAFE works is basically the investor, puts this amount of money in the company, and it's not a specific valuation. They don't know how many shares they're going to get. The SAFE just says that if the company does a priced round later on, like the kind of round I mentioned, where you're raising 2-3 million, and there's a term sheet and all that kind of stuff, and there's a firm valuation for the company where shares are issued, then the investor gets shares as well based on the amount of money they put in, usually like at a discount, because they put the money in earlier, so they should get a few more shares. So like your shares are valued at $1 a share when you do your press round, they'll get your shares potentially at 80 cents a share. So we'll get a few more shares. So if they invested $50,000, they get $50,000 divided by 80 cents. That's how many shares they're getting.
So with SAFE, sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to confirm. So with SAFE, they are not actually releasing any kind of shares initially when they take the money from the angel round or friends and family round.
No, a SAFE is just an agreement to issue shares in the future when you do a priced equity round. So
it can say which round. Basically, it can say it might be seed round or Series A round. That's when they're going to release the share.
Yeah, usually it'll say if you're raising at least X amount of money, usually it would be the first priced round you do that the SAFE converts that. Unless you're raising like a very small amount, then maybe it doesn't get that qualification. Most of the time, you will convert. And the great thing about the SAFE is you don't have to agree what your company is worth. You don't have to agree on all those shareholder rights, any of that stuff. That gets pushed down later on when you do the price round, which is why it's a lot more efficient for companies. It's a lot less legal paperwork, a lot less expenses. They just sign the SAFE, then you have money invested.
And you're also like further along and you have proven your idea, market validation, and that actually improves your company valuation as well, comparison to if you end up giving up equity in friends and family or angel round. You might, if you are doing simple equity, you might end up giving a lot more because they will ask for market validation, which you don't have at this point.
Yeah, doing a priced round, like when you're very early stage and you don't have like a product yet, and you don't have revenue. It's very tough. It's a crapshoot to evaluate a startup at that point. So a lot of the time, it's better not to have that whole conversation about what's this idea worth and all that stuff. It gives you time to sort of build on the idea. You have a little bit of investment capital, and then once you do a price round, that kind of
And
that
then
applies to a safe investor as well. Like that gets negotiated later on, and the investor gets the benefit of that discount in the safe or valuation cap, which will say say your company does really well and it's worth $100 million when you raise or something like that. The valuation cap will say there's a $10 million valuation cap for the investor. Their shares convert, assuming the company's worth 10 million, not 100 million. So they get a lot more shares. Again, because they invested earlier. A lot of people look at the valuation cap as kind of like the informative valuation for a company in a safe, but people should be aware that that's not what it is. It doesn't mean your company's worth $5 million when you do the safe. It's kind of like there to protect an investor. It says that no matter what, they'll get shares, assuming your company's worth $5 million or less, no more than that, even if you raise it at a higher valuation.
that's I think that's very important to do. I was not also very sure about safe when I started in the beginning, but we didn't even do the seed round at that point, so it was okay for us.
Yeah, it worked
Yeah.
out.
So other than safe, what other methods they can use to protect themselves from taking a lot of money?
I mean, one other issue is sort of deciding whether you're going to raise and who you're going to raise from. So there's kind of a lot of talk right now about whether venture capital is right for all companies. For most companies, most startups, it's actually not. Like VCs, you know, they want to take a company and grow it, 10x, 100x, scale up like crazy, and
Yeah.
that's how they make their money, and that's their business. But for a lot of companies, that doesn't make sense. For a lot of companies, you don't really need that, and it's going to be kind of a bad situation for both you and the investor if you want to do one thing of the company and they want to do a different thing. So one thing for a lot of companies to consider, everybody wants to say we talked to all these VCs, we raised X million dollars. But again, that money comes with a lot of strings and a lot of pressure. It's a lot more, getting that term sheet. There's a lot of legal stuff you have to worry about all the rights and terms and all that stuff. For a lot of companies, you might be better off raising from angels, a more limited amount, or even if you're not doing safe, you can do an equity round of angels too, but it's usually a lot less complicated than with a VC because you're not going to have this full term sheet with complicated terms. So for a lot of companies, I would say the legal documents can protect you to a point, but the best thing you can do is kind of decide how much you want to raise and who to raise it from. And that doesn't always mean raise the most money you can. Because if you're at an early stage, that's when your company is going to have the lowest valuation. That's when you're going to get to give the most of your company up to investors. And if you need that money to scale up and to grow your business, that's fine. But if you don't really need that money, you only need if you don't need $1 million, you only need 300,000 to sort of build up this MVP and this works, to see if it works and put it out there and see if you can get some traction. You're much better off just raising 300,000, building the MVP, seeing if it works, and then if it does, you can raise the other 700,000 at a way better valuation and get way better terms than trying to raise a full $1 million, which may be a lot harder to do. You might get in bed with an investor that has different priorities from you, and it might not be as good a situation. So I would say, choose how much you want to invest, how much you want to raise, and make sure it fits your plans and your situation, and only raise kind of what you need.